Great to see everybody this morning. Thank you for joining us for our Bible study, especially this side of the room. You've kind of lopsided the front side over here, but that's okay. Actually, most people, that's this side pretty full too. So anyway, great to see everybody this morning. We're going to be in Exodus chapter 12 here in just a minute. We've been working through this series of studies on these Old Testament examples, right? We're just emulating Old Testament worship, right? We don't emulate it because the authority has changed, the covenant's changed, and so the purposes and instructions of God have changed. But in this series of studies we're doing called Worship, trying to look at various examples of things that they did, both in Old Testament, eventually, this is the first half, eventually we've got one more series of things to look at in relationship to the time period of the kings and some of the prophets, but eventually we'll get into the New Testament, we'll make some compare and contrast kind of situations then, but right now we're looking at these old worship scenes. What can we learn from them? What education can we appreciate from them? What did they do? Why did they do it? How did they do it? And see what kinds of things that schoolmaster that is the Old Testament can bring us to understand and appreciate about how you come into the presence of God. And that was really kind of our discussion Wednesday night when you see them at Mount Sinai there and all those restrictions and precautions and warnings and recognition of what it really means to come into the presence of God and how it is and how serious we should all take that. And so that'll be, again, our study today, but we're going to move into this, we're going to backwards in our study in some ways. We kind of move forward through Exodus a little bit. We're going to come back to chapter 12 and look at this Passover instructions here in just a moment. But before we go any further, if you would, let's bow our heads together, share in a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, thank you for the day. Thank you for the blessings you give us, the benefit of studying your word today. Strengthen us in our study. Guide us. Help us to appreciate your testimony every day more and more, to know your wisdom and guidance that comes from it, and just encourage us to want to know you, to build our relationship and connectivity with you through your Son. Thank you for him. Thank you for our great high priest who allows us to come to you and draw close to you through him. Strengthen us today, guide us in all that's right and good, and we pray all these things through thy Son's name. Amen. So we've been doing just some very basic kind of approaches to these texts, right? We're trying to just look at it real quick from an overview kind of standpoint, and then we're going to start pulling what's going on, why are they doing it, how are they doing it, when they did it, kinds of things. So just read with me here for a few verses in Exodus chapter 12, and if you have your lesson sheets, that's the third point under the section of Moses. We're going to look at Exodus chapter 12, verses 1 through 14. And the Lord spoke unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. And I could have made this point at any point in time, but it's interesting, right? How important is this moment? Yeah, it's significant when it's going to completely change what? Their calendar, right? This moment that's about to happen, and it hasn't happened yet, but what's about to happen and the importance of how they're going to commemorate this moment becomes so ingrained into their history and their relationship with God that it's actually going to change the way they view the calendar in which they live by. Speak you unto all the congregation, verse 3 of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month, they shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for an house. What does that mean, by the way? Does that mean, do you think of houses in the same way we would? Right, larger family house, right? The household, the larger body of a family lineage responsibility here, not necessarily what we would often think of as a house-to-house kind of thing. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats. You shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. And they shall take of the blood and strike it on the two side posts and on the upper door post of the houses wherein they shall eat. And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire, and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden at all with water, but roast with fire, his head with his legs, and with the purtenance thereof. And ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning, and that which remaineth of it until the morning ye shall burn with fire. And thus shall you eat it with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand. And you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and I will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where you are, and when I see the blood I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and you shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. Okay, so it's interesting as you just read those 14 verses, and you begin to appreciate the instructions God's giving. So not to answer the questions for you, so let's just get a background here. So this act of worship towards God connected to the Passover, this is a simplistic question, but when is this act of worship occurring in the moment, and when will it occur in the future? Okay, so it's the last of the plagues, right? And just to get the imagery here. So we've had how many up till now? 9, right? We're going to have 10 total. So we got 9 plagues up to this point. God's simply trying to do what to Pharaoh? Yeah, he's trying to convince him, right? He's trying to convince him. Turn that hardened heart that initially the text even implies that God's actions hardened Pharaoh even more initially, right? He was hardened to this idea of releasing the Israelites to begin with, and those initial plagues kind of even deepened that hardening for a while. But finally, a very devastating scene is going to unfold. Hasn't happened yet, by the way. But very devastating plague is going to come, wherein the death of the firstborn, and it will eventually, at least briefly, get Pharaoh to change his thinking about that. So that's the when. Why? Why did God institute this act of worship? Okay, so it's a memorial. So in other words, this wasn't a one-time event, right? In fact, you have the Passover continuing throughout their history. There's some moments where they kind of disconnect from God, and you kind of see a lack of effort on their part to honor the Passover. But we know clear up until the time of whom? Jesus, right? Because that's the time period in which he would be sacrificed, right? The crucifixion is going to happen during the Jewish Passover, and so there's a highly significant reason why God has established this permanent to them memorial that would occur clear up until the time of Jesus as he kind of fulfills and finishes the need for the Passover.
It's almost like, when he fulfills the Passover need, he fulfilled it in the same way that the Passover originally happened, the death of his firstborn. Jesus would finally fulfill, and it would end that Passover just the way it started. He ended it the same way.
Yeah, there wouldn't be any more need for it beyond this. When we get into our New Testament conversations, we're going to start making some of those comparisons and make some of the connectivity between Old Testament worship and New Testament times. So how specific then were the instructions that you read here? Pretty specific, right? He didn't leave much to their thinking, right? This wasn't about them getting some general ideas, but he's very specific. Kind of the only pause God gave was if your household was too small to have a lamb to offer, then you could connect to who? Your neighbor, right? But they would all have to be where? in the same house, right? So we're going to combine our efforts here together because our households is small. And so we're all going to join together and come to a place, and we're going to sacrifice a lamb together, and we're going to put the blood where? On the doorposts, right? We're going to put that blood on those doorposts, those side posts, and we're going to find the protection of God from this Passover event. What are they going to do while they wait? They're going to eat it, right? They're going to eat their sacrifice, and not only are they going to eat it, but they have to cook it how? Cook it over fire, right? Don't boil it. Don't eat it raw, right? You cook it over fire, and you're going to consume how much of it? All of it, right? All of it. You're going to consume all of it, and if your belly can't handle it, then don't leave it. Do what? Burn the rest. Burn the rest. Okay? So it's fascinating to me that God, well, I shouldn't say fascinating because it's God. It's His right to decide however He wants to do this. But it's interesting that He doesn't leave a lot to them, right? They're just instruction after instruction after instruction as it relates to this. What were some of the other things? I haven't even named them all yet. What other kinds of instructions were they given? Okay, so and we'll find a parallel eventually in that, won't we? That they're supposed to have what kind of bread there? Unleavened bread. Unleavened bread. Spoiler alert. So what would have been present in the upper room when Jesus institutes the Lord's Supper? Why unleavened bread? Yeah, the first thing they were doing when they got there was actually observing the Passover, right? Jesus tells His disciples, go, you'll find a man who's got an upper room so that we can partake of the Passover. And the instructions further state that you're not even to have what? Leaven in the house, right? Yep. For an entire week, right? There's this purification, this sanctification. So Jesus would not have chosen a place to partake of the Passover for the very last time, right, that it would need to be partaken of, and do it in a fashion that dishonored the instructions. That's about a 6-week away from now conversation. We'll have it when we get into that New Testament study. But I want to plant the seed in your mind to be thinking about those kinds of things when we start making those compares and contrasts as it relates to New Testament times. Yep, go ahead, Bob. I'm sorry.
The unleavened bread extends a little bit further than just for the Passover for the Old Testament. Christ's body was without sin.
Yeah.
And the unleavened bread represents no sin.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see it in that. You can see that
unleavened bread because His body was without sin.
Yeah, it's unleavened
It's
by sin.
representative of His body.
Yeah, and you can see that in some of those descriptions. What else? Go ahead, Amy. I'm sorry.
Verse 11
Yeah.
tells how exactly they're to be dressed,
Yeah.
with their shoes on their feet and their staff in their hand, and eat it in haste. So
Yeah.
this wasn't a leisurely.
Right. So they're eating. So that you look at verse 11, and Amy points that out. That not only so we know how they're supposed to prepare the food, we know how they're supposed to eat the food, we know what they're supposed to do if there's any left over, and we also know what they were supposed to be doing while they do that. They're to eat it with their loins girded, shoes on, staff in your hand, eat it quickly, and why? You got to be ready to go. Why did they need to be ready to go in a hurry? He's going to let them go, but only for how long before He changes His mind? Yeah, it's a short period of time. If you delay around, if you're not ready to go when Pharaoh says it's okay to go, it's going to be a problem. And so the implication here is that this is a reminder to you that when God starts moving the pieces into place to provide what He's desiring to give to you, you need to be continually prepared to receive it. And when the time is to go, be ready to go. And it's interesting imagery. when that happens. Your other thoughts? Go ahead, Colin.
It's a little interesting. There's a couple things you could probably pull from this. One of them being he's doing this in haste because he's about to pretty much make Pharaoh hit rock bottom by taking his firstborn son, because he's not, Pharaoh's not doing this. So he's going to take his firstborn son in the middle of the night. And then you kind of also look at the New Testament again, see Jesus talking about how the time's going to come like a thief in the night. This is in the middle of the night. They need to be prepared for this to happen. We kind of need to be prepared for when Jesus is going to come back.
Yeah, the need for preparation hasn't changed. Yeah, absolutely.
You're talking a lot of people.
Yeah.
Get ready to go.
Yeah. Not an easy undertaking. And then he explains to them why, right? It's interesting. Usually, so when we saw that celebratory worship, the Song of Moses that we looked at in chapter 19, remember, nope, that was last week, right? 15, I believe. You remember that was kind of reactionary, right? That was spur of the moment. That was we just. But this is kind of the exact opposite. He's preparing them ahead of time. He's giving them this precise instructions as to what they're going to do the night this happens, and it will also be instructions they use to perform this act of worship towards God from that point forward when they honor the Passover. So we talked in our studies so far, particularly in the times of Moses in our conversations, that when Moses writes that song and the Israelites celebrating rules and the women and their celebratory dance, whatever that happened to be, it was all reactionary, right? They hadn't been given any specific instructions. They weren't told what to do. They're just responding to the moment as it relates to that situation. Whereas this, they're given every single detail of how it is God prescribes this act of worship towards Him during the days of the Passover. Any other specifics? Did I miss any of them? Say it again, Will. Okay, so you see other responsibility as to what they're supposed to do and not as you move forward, especially as you move forward in their history as it relates to that. Say it again.
Specifics about the land.
Okay. So there's specifics about the lamb or goat, but how, what kind and the specifics as it relates to that. Some of that kind of transpires moving forward as they see some of that. Notice verse 14, you're supposed to do this perpetually, right? Throughout your generations. What else? Do you have thought? Okay, go ahead.
The latter part of verse 12 is very significant as well,
Yeah.
Brian.
Yeah.
In all of this, it is not. God is showing that the gods of Egypt were not real gods, and He is executing judgment on them as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I appreciate that, Kevin, because I hadn't really thought about this connectivity, but so then every time they would remember the Passover, if they would remember this reasoning that God gave them when He institutes it, maybe they would have done a better job of have no other gods before me, right? You had an annual memorial that perpetuated through your generations that should have been a constant reminder that God destroyed and showed the emptiness of those Egyptian gods. You shouldn't be adopting a relationship with any other God. And now you got me thinking. I'm going to have to think about that a little bit more because that's interesting, right? This should have been a yearly memorial reminding them of the power of God.
Yeah. And when this is talked about again in the book of Numbers in
Yeah.
chapter 33 and verse 4. He makes that same statement again about
Yeah.
executing judgment against their gods.
Yeah. And so as we noted at the Mount Sinai scene in Exodus 19 last Wednesday, the presence and power of God, right? And it's here. It's here too in this Passover scene. Our minds might jump more to what's going on and the plague and the reminder of how God passed over and that kind of thing, but the power of God's here too. It's here too.
Whole thing, the whole situation,
Yeah.
everything that was going on.
Yeah.
He was showing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to point out also in verse 12 that along with that, it wasn't just mankind that was struck, it was the firstborn of the beast
Yeah.
and the man. So
Yeah, the destructive power of God that brought down on Egypt it was demonstrated across the board. There should have been no one. Every knee should have bowed, right? Every knee should have bowed before the Lamb when this happens. Go ahead, Megan. I'll come back, Bob.
I think it's interesting that when he institutes it every year, he knew they were going to forget. He knew them, and he knew you're going to forget the might of this night, and you need to remember it.
Yeah.
And even though they had it to do every year, they still didn't remember the insignificance.
They still falter, and it's sad when you think about what they have been able to share, and most likely because generations came and went and they forgot to remind the why. That's kind of why we're having this conversation in this series of worship scenes, and we're asking that big question of why were they worshiping? Because when you forget the why, it's easy to just put it away and forget why God instituted those things to begin with. Go ahead, Bob.
When they would invite the neighbors in because they had larger land, their family would be eating, I am assuming in verse 7 when it says, when they put the blood on the door frames of the houses, they were where they were to eat the lambs. I'm assuming that those neighbors would have to stay that night in that household.
That would be my conclusion as well. I could be wrong on that. I suppose they could have split. That would be a natural conclusion I would make as well. I don't know that I could prove it, but yes. So appreciate all those things. So question D then was, what aspect of the character of God is demonstrated in this scene, and how should we react to it?
Power, that there is nothing and never will be anything that's more powerful than God himself, and that we should fear and respect that.
Okay, so you see God's power and the rightful fear and respect that should come from that scene when this devastation unfolds, and the memorial is to remember that aspect of how God overcame. What else do you see in his character?
When he tells him something, he means it,
Okay.
he'll do it.
Okay, when God speaks, it comes with authority and power of the God behind it.
justice, he's executing
Okay.
judgment.
Okay, judgment and justice that rightly came against Egypt. What else do you see?
Mercy.
There you go. Did every firstborn die? No. In the midst of his judgment, there has always been an avenue, a path for mercy. God's grace, you will find, and that's worthy to be worshiped and celebrated, right? So as you would commemorate the Passover, it's not just about God devastated those horrible Egyptians. It's also God's mercy spared us from that calamity. We briefly mentioned last Wednesday, had they been spared from all of the other plagues? Not all of them, right? Some of those plagues affected God's people as well. But when it came to this devastating final blow of his nostrils, that you see Moses speak of in that song that he wrote, you find a path for his people to find mercy and be spared from that same destructive path that the Egyptians had put God on. Judgment, justice, yeah, it's there. Power of God's absolutely there. Fear and respect of God's absolutely there. All that's there. But mercy upon those who did mercy on those who did what? Yeah, did this. Who did these things that God had instructed them to do. They were able to find a path to mercy. It's interesting.
There's also severity in people who want to just speak of God's love all the time and want to ignore the other side.
It's right. It's a great example of all of the character of God. You see the justice and the power and the judgment. You see, right? You see His mercy, His grace, His kindness towards those who followed Him. So you get opportunity to see both sides in one scene.
Kind of like the worship scene we talked about Mount Sinai. There were specific instructions that were given, and they had to follow them. And we saw His power, we saw all of that. We also saw His mercy because He did give them a chance to obey and not go and touch the mountain. And so it's kind of like this whole thing just repeating over and over.
Yeah, the evidence of those two aspects of the character of God is seen in lots of scenes, and some of them we've already looked at.
If they didn't follow these instructions, they wouldn't be spared from losing
Right.
their firstborn. And I think that shows the free will God gives all of us.
Sure. It's choice, right? A decision has to be made about whether I want to honor the instructions of God or not. And that's hard to do.
I am the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah, great catch there. Because remember, go back. Moses was worried. When I go tell the people who sent me, God says, you go tell them the I am sent you. And you'll see that powerful kind of phrasing coming up as well. Jump down to verse 26 for a minute. So we got the instructions. There's some things. There's an interlude there that we could have talked a little bit more about, but in further ideas. But I simply want to make sure we catch this at the end. So he says, and it shall come to pass when your children shall say unto you, what mean you by this service? So someday the next generation is going to say, what's all this all about? Right? Why are we doing this? This is what you'll say. It is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt when He smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses, and the people bowed the head and worshiped. They're going to tell every generation that they're supposed to anyway. They didn't do a great job at times. But you're going to tell each generation that when we do this, this is why. I won't. I'll bring that up later. But I'll come back to that. And the children of Israel went away and did as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did. How did they react? They did what they were told, right? They followed the instructions. God gave them lots of details, lots of things they were supposed to do. And the text simply concludes, before that plague comes, they did it. And because of that, they'll reap the benefits of that mercy and kindness that God extends to them.
And they obeyed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It would have just been easy for those in future generations not to believe in that story that the water was parted and all the various things that happened to them.
Yeah.
But they believed what they were told.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's an important part.
That conviction of faith leads them to fulfill what it is that God's told them to do. Absolutely.
The fact that they didn't really know God for a long time.
Yeah.
And
certain senses.
And separated.
So these plagues, I think, to me, especially the ones that affected all of them, brought them to his faith,
Sure.
you know, and then to see how he can spare them. It just, they had to see all this because they hadn't seen it for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
To have that faith again.
Yeah, absolutely. So the final question we've been asking out of every one of our contexts is then simply this. And each of you, I challenge you to leave one. But so what do we learn? What do we learn about worship? We learned history, but that's not our study. Our study is about worship. What do we learn about worship? Okay, there's reason, right? That worship, when God has very vividly defined and described, it's not arbitrary. There's reason behind what God instructs. What else do you see about worship? Okay, when God has specified, right, when God's been specific about how certain things should be done, then our responsibility is to honor it, and not assume or overstep what God has instructed us in. That's a good seed to plant for future conversations. What else? What else do you see here?
Sin's not tolerated.
Okay. And that's certainly true, historically speaking. We see about worship, though, about the worship scene that's happening here, because that's what notice at the end of verse 27 is how he described it. What can we learn from it?
They didn't really question it, they just did it.
Okay. They didn't try to debate God about how that worship should take place. That he instructed them. Okay, you see reverence, absolute reverence for God as it relates to that. Okay, right. There's that side, right? This is a reminder of the mercy of God, and as they would move forward, especially. I mean, it's a horrible night. I mean, can you imagine the wailings that would have been going on all throughout Egypt? I mean, you just can you even fathom just instantaneously the amount of grief that hit that place? But as you would move forward, it would be a continual did for them in that moment, removing them from bondage and worthy to be worshipped. What else do you see? Just think. Go.
During their worship, they were saved from the death.
Yeah, what are they doing while the wailing of Egypt is going on? They're in the midst of this worship to God. When the most devastating of all of the plagues is happening around them, they are turning, by instruction, they are turning to the one place you should turn to in such a moment, right? Great example, I think we can learn from them. Go ahead, Mike.
I can see Egyptians trying to copy what the Israelites are doing, but not following all the instructions.
It's possible where somebody might go, wonder what they're doing, and see if they can't emulate it in some way without really knowing what the full instructions would be.
God completely and
Okay.
finding peace.
Yeah. The benefit. This with you, and I'm trying to get y'all to just think a little bit about what you're seeing. So in verse 26, he said, "It shall come to pass when your children shall say unto you, what mean ye by this service?" How many times have we talked to our children about why we come into this building? Right? Not just the what, right? We can talk to them about, and I think, I'll be cautious here because I don't want, this sounds like a judgmental kind of statement. It's not that. It's a think about it kind of statement. But I wonder sometimes whether we we can become very focused on, children, this is what we do when we go worship God. And we never tell them why. And then they grow up, and all they knew was the what. And now they have no desire to know the why. I learned from this that when it comes to worship, our children don't need to not only know that we should and that we must, and this is the how, but they too should know why. Why did God tell us to pray? Why did God tell us to sing? Why did God tell us to commemorate and remember His Son? Why? And that was going to be important to them. Bell rang. I'll come back. I'll give you 2 minutes of Wednesday night, Lord willing, if you've got more out of this text. And then I want to jump into the next one, right? We want to bounce out of well, we're still going to be in Mosaic time, but look at a couple examples from the Kings as we wrap up the Old Testament side of our conversations. But I really want you to think about that. Think about the whys that you're seeing. What's going on? How's it going on? Sure, we've got to understand that. But there are lots of lessons kind of hidden in the midst of the text if we get just past all the whats and the hows and all that kind of thing. So let's do that, Lord willing, on Wednesday when we